Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast, our interactive 15-minute review of this week's message. We revisit the word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode. My name is Paul Adefarasin.
I want to start with a question, one that I think probably haunts a lot of us, whether we admit it or not.
Okay.
Have you ever felt like your history, your past, effectively disqualifies you from your future?
Oh, yeah.
All the time. You know, you look at the mistakes, the baggage, the years you maybe wasted, and you think, well, the prologue to my life is a mess, so the rest of the book is probably going to be a tragedy.
It's that classic imposter syndrome, but on a spiritual level, we let our resume define our identity, and if the resume is messy, we just assume the whole identity is broken.
Right. But I was reading through the source material for today, which, by the way, is from a talk called Kindom Life from Inside Out by Paul Adefarasin. And he makes this pretty radical counter-argument.
He really does.
He suggests that the very thing we see as a disqualifier might actually be a setup.
It's a fascinating take, and we should be clear, we're not just doing a sermon recap here. The whole mission of this deep dive is to get into a specific theological argument he's building. He combines some, really high-level metaphysics about the nature of God with a reinterpretation of a famous biblical parable that, frankly, just flips the entire value proposition of faith on its head.
Yeah, I saw that part of the parables. It definitely goes against what I learned in Sunday school.
For sure.
But before we get to that twist, we have to lay the groundwork. The speaker starts with a concept that feels a little abstract at first, this idea of inner alignment and the definition of God as a person.
It does start deep. He draws a really sharp line, right out of the gate. Usually when people think of God, they think of a cosmic force like gravity or energy or the universe.
Unmoved mover.
Exactly. But the speaker argues that those are just attributes. Power is what God has, but a person is who God is.
Okay, can we break that down? Because person makes me think of a human, a body. I don't think that's what he means.
No, not at all. Not a human body. He's talking about personality, intellect, emotion versus a cold, static force. Think of it like this. It's the difference between knowing a CEO has the power to fire you and knowing that same CEO's favorite color, what makes them laugh, what they actually care about.
One's a force you fear, the other is a relationship you engage with.
Precisely. And to define this, he uses that biblical term, I am.
Right, the I am. But he uses a strange word for it. He calls it ising.
Ising. Yeah, it's a clinky word in English, but I think he's trying to get at a state of being that's beyond our idea of existence.
How so?
Well, you and I exist because of things.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents met, we eat food, we breathe air, we depend on external factors to be here.
Sure.
The I am, in this view, doesn't rely on anything. He just is. He isn't just in the timeline. He's kind of like the paper the timeline is drawn on.
Okay, that helps.
Yep.
And if he's the paper the timeline is drawn on, that explains the sort of time travel aspect the source mentions.
Exactly. The source uses the Hebrew word shama, which roughly translates to he is there. The argument is that for the I am, there's no past or future. It's all just now.
So he is Shama in my past and Shama in my future at the same time.
At the exact same moment. Yeah. It's a bit of a brain bender.
It is. But the speaker uses this to explain why our understanding of God has had to evolve. He maps out this whole timeline of progressive revelation.
Is he basically arguing that people in the past just didn't get the full picture?
That's the core of it. He says God reveals himself layer by layer, and he starts with Adam. The source describes Adam's relationship with God as, surprisingly, pretty shallow.
That is surprising. You always hear about Eden as, perfection.
A perfect environment, sure. Adam had a palace, he had provision, but the speaker points out he didn't really know God intimately. He knew God as, like, a manufacturer, a landlord.
And when things went wrong,
What did he do?
he hid.
He hid in the field, and you should keep a mental pin in that word field. It becomes absolutely crucial later. For Adam, the kingdom becomes a place he was banished from.
Okay, so Adam is the landlord phase. Then we jump to Abraham. Thousands of years later, Abraham knows God as El Shaddai, the Almighty. But the source calls this relationship episodic.
Episodic, like a TV show.
Huh? In a way, yeah. It was based on distinct events. Abraham builds an altar, they have an encounter, and then radio silence for a while. He knew God could do things, keep a promise, give him a son. but it wasn't a constant indwelling connection.
More transaction-based.
Exactly. Then you get to Moses.
And that's a huge shift.
A massive shift. The source really highlights that God reveals himself to Moses as I am, that is-ing nature we talked about. This wasn't just about power anymore. It was about presence. The text says they spoke face to face.
He understood God's ways, not just his acts.
Right. And then finally, David. The source seems to have a real soft spot for David.
Yeah, I noticed that.
David represents this inner alignment. He was a king, but he saw himself as a vice king, acting on behalf of the real king, God. But, and this is a critical distinction, even for David, God didn't live inside him. He was aligned with God, but not inhabited by God.
So the whole trajectory, from Adam hiding in a field to David's inner alignment, is moving toward this kingdom life from inside out.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to move God from being this external force you visit at an altar to an internal government.
But the king within. Precisely.
Yeah, but this is where the rubber meets the road for me. If the goal is this perfect inner alignment, what happens when you look at your life and realize you are, well, a mess?
Yeah.
And this is where he brings up that phrase, the scandalous prologue.
It's such a strong phrase, isn't it? He's directly addressing that feeling we started with, that your past disqualifies you. The source argues that if you look at the sort of generals of the faith, a messy past isn't an exception. It's almost a prerequisite.
He lists a whole roster of names, and he does not pull punches.
Yeah.
For our listeners who might not be biblical scholars, maybe we should explain why these people were so scandalous. He brings up Rahab, for example.
Right. Rahab wasn't just a sinner in some vague sense. She was a prostitute, lived in Jericho, an enemy city of Israel. Socially, religiously, she was a total outcast.
Yet she ends up in the lineage of King David.
The great-grandmother of King David.
Yeah,
and Paul. Paul, before he was the Apostle Paul, was Saul. And Saul was, essentially a religious terrorist. He presided over the execution of Christians. He was a murderer, also a murderer, and a fugitive. He killed an Egyptian, hid the body, and then spent 40 years in the desert as a total washout.
So that's quite the lineup. A prostitute, a terrorist, and a fugitive.
And we haven't even mentioned Peter, who was a coward and denied he even knew Jesus to save his own skin. The speaker's point is that God's grace is scandalous because it flirts with the very people that society, and even religious society, would just cast aside.
That sounds great, on a bumper sticker. But does the source explain why? Why pick the mess? Is it just to show off?
There's a deeper logic to it. The speaker suggests God uses the raw material of the personality. Take Paul. That same fanatical zeal that made him a persecutor, that was the exact same energy God wanted to use to spread the gospel. He didn't change Paul's personality. He just realigned his purpose.
So the INM sees the energy, not just the error.
Right. Because remember that time travel concept? Since God is in the eternal now, he's already experienced your future. When he looks at the scandalous prologue of your life, he isn't worried. He's already seen the epilogue. He envisionages your future.
Okay, that sets us up perfectly for the part of the transcript that I have to admit really surprised me. The whole reinterpretation of the parables.
Matthew 13. Yeah, this is good stuff.
It is. The parable of the hidden treasure and the pearl of great price. Now, I'll be honest, the way I've always heard this explained is, I'm the merchant, Jesus is the pearl. And I have to sell everything, my ego, my sin, my bad habits, to buy Jesus. It's about my sacrifice to get God.
That is absolutely the traditional reading. It puts the burden of action and the burden of cost squarely on the believer.
But the speaker says that's just wrong.
He says it's hermeneutically wrong, yeah. Based on the context of the chapter, he completely flips the role.
He does.
He points to an earlier verse, verse 37, to sort of unlock the code for the whole chapter. In his analysis, the field is the world. Humanity, the merchant, the man who is seeking, is Christ.
Which means the treasure is us.
The treasure is you. The pearl is you.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the implications of that. If Christ is the merchant,
then Christ is the one who sold everything. The source argues that Jesus gave up his glory, his position in heaven, and became poor specifically to buy the field. He bought the whole messy world of humanity just to get the treasure hidden inside it.
Wow, that brings us right back to Adam hiding in the field.
Exactly. Adam hid in the field. The treasure was covered in dirt, but the merchant knew the value was there all along. He didn't buy the field for the dirt. He bought it for the treasure.
That is a massive, massive psychological shift. It goes from, I have to scrape together enough virtue to afford God, to God went broke to acquire me.
It changes the whole dynamic from seeking to being sought. The speaker even jokes that you couldn't afford a single toenail of the kingdom, so the transaction had to go the other way. You're not the buyer. You are the prize.
But, and there's always a but, if I'm this valuable pearl, why does my life still feel like the scandalous prologue? Why don't I feel like a treasure?
And that is the crucial nuance the source adds. He says it's not enough for God to see you as a pearl. You have to agree with him.
The agreement.
He says, and I'm quoting here, the agreement causes the power of God to move. If the merchant sees a diamond, but the diamond thinks it's just a piece of coal, all that potential is locked up. You have to see yourself the way he sees you to activate the function.
He has a really specific analogy for this activation process, the Airbus A380.
The test pilot analogy, yes. And it's a great one for understanding why we go through hard times. He argues that if you have a machine as complex as an A380, you don't ask the flight attendant what it's capable of. You don't even ask a commercial pilot. You ask the test pilot.
Well, a test pilot.
Because the test pilot works with the designer. They know the stress limits. They know exactly how much pressure the wings can take before they snap.
And the argument is that God is the test pilot.
God is the designer and the test pilot. The speaker is basically saying, you don't know your own limits. You think you're going to break under the pressure of your current situation, but the test pilot knows you are designed to handle that G-force.
So, he's not trying to break you.
He's pushing you to the edge of the envelope to prove to you what you can handle.
But that requires an incredible amount of trust. You have to trust that the pilot knows the instrumentation better than you do.
And that requires growth. The source talks about the danger of going without growing. Adam had the palace, but he didn't grow. He was entitled. Jesus, on the other hand, learned obedience through suffering. The call is to grow up into that identity of the pearl. You have to mature into the value God has already placed on you.
Okay, so this could all stay very theoretical, identity, pearls, test pilots. But the speaker takes a very sharp turn into something practical. He talks about how this inner alignment affects relationships.
He does.
And I have to say, he has a very unique definition of the word handsome.
Ha! Yes, he does. It's a bit of a wordplay, but it connects right back to the core theme. He breaks down handsome.
It's not about having a chiseled jawline. It's handsome, having your hand in your pocket to provide.
Exactly. He's talking to the men there. The argument is that if you are internally aligned, if you're a vice king like David, then you act with generosity. You provide, you care, you don't demand respect, you earn it.
And for women, he talks about the home as a sanctuary.
Yeah, he advises that when negative emotions are running high, the instinct is often to control the situation, to clamp down, but he suggests that a woman with inner alignment creates a sanctuary. She creates an atmosphere of peace that can disarm the conflict.
Now, some listeners might hear that and think it sounds a little traditional.
It might on the surface, but if you look at the logic of the argument, it's really about emotional regulation. If you truly believe you're the pearl and that the king lives inside you, you don't need to fight for control or dominance.
You operate from security.
You operate from a place of security. If you're internally wealthy, you can afford to be generous and peaceful externally.
That really connects the dots. So the relationship advice isn't just a random sidebar. It's the proof of the pudding.
It is. If you have kingdom life from inside out, your marriage should look different. Your internal government stabilizes your external world.
Yeah.
If there's a king on the throne of your heart, your home becomes a colony of that kingdom, not a battleground.
So let's zoom out and just look at the whole picture here. We've gone from the I am who exists outside of time to realizing we all have these scandalous prologues to finding out we're actually the treasure that cost God everything. What's the main takeaway?
I think the takeaway is a fundamental shift in your personal narrative. The source ends with a reference to the song Stand By Me. Yes, the speaker points out that Moses and David were incredibly flawed men, but God stood by them. And his final argument is, if God stands by you, who can really be against you?
It goes back to the test pilot.
If the designer is in the cockpit with you, you're going to land the plane.
So it's this idea that you are currently living in the prologue, but you don't have to stay stuck there.
The speaker puts it beautifully. He says you're in the prologue, but the real story, the log, begins when you align inwardly. And he asks the listener, are you reading your history, or are you letting the I am write your future?
That's the challenge, isn't it? It's easy to read the history because it's already written. It's hard to trust a future you can't see.
And that's why it requires that agreement. You have to agree that you're the pearl, even when you feel like the dirt it's buried in.
Well, that definitely gives us plenty to think about. Whether you're in a palace or hiding in a field, the value hasn't changed.
The merchant has already paid the price. The value is settled.
Thanks for helping us unpack this transcript. This was Definitely more than just a sermon recap.
My pleasure. It was great.
And to our listener, take a look at your prologue and ask yourself if you're ready to start the real story. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. Follow the podcast, and please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.